And that was always my take from 2001: A Space Odyssey was it felt inaccessible. I mean, I saw it as a teenager, and I think I went back and saw it once in my 20s, but there was no like emotional catharsis, or there was no it was purely to me, it was purely an intellectual exercise, and you can go into it, but I didn't get anything out of the movie emotionally. And that kind of takes us to the next film that we were going to talk about, the Shawshank Redemption, because I feel like that one works on a, totally emotional. It's an emotional roller coaster watching it, and has so many of these moments, at least for me anyways, that really grab me emotionally. But maybe we can dig into that one a little bit.
I love talking about the Shawshank Redemption in this kind of way. And the reason is because the Shawshank Redemption, very much like 2001, was a box office disaster. Okay,
I will add one thing about that. I know that's sort of the take on Shawshank Redemption. I think it came out in '95. That's right when I had moved to LA, and people were watching the movie. And while it may not have been a box office hit, there was a general consensus that this was a really great film. Like, I remember my movie friends. I was in LA and things. So I wasn't in LA when 2001: Space Odyssey, so I can't speak to that. But I do think that, like, I don't know that the fact it wasn't box office gold. It could have just been a coincidence. You know what I'm saying? It could have just, the marketing department just didn't get it right. Because everybody I knew that watched it thought it was a fantastic film right when it came out in the theater.
So kind of both parts of what you're saying. Listen, so like when you look at the critical response was very positive. And then when the Academy Awards came out, it was like nominated for 5 or 6 or something like that awards, right? But it didn't win any of the Academy Awards for any of those awards that it was nominated for. And that's a key point, meaning that maybe then the history of this film could have played out in a different way, because a lot of films will not do great box office when they're released, but then when they win some Academy Awards, then suddenly the people go there and they're discovered. So that didn't happen as well. And what I will say to you is, why I love Shawshank Redemption and talking about it is because it's almost like, in many ways, except for the fact that it is an adaptation. Let's just imagine for a moment that it is the Frank Darabont original thing, because the Stephen King thing only makes the performance of the movie almost more pathetic, that it was based on a Stephen King thing and it still did very badly. Okay. So I actually have my history with the film was, I remember reading it because it was a short story in different seasons when Stephen King wrote it. And I remember reading it very specifically, the 4 stories. I said Shawshank would have been the last one that I would ever have chosen to adapt, because it just seemed very, very difficult to adapt. But here's the point. The movie gets released. It does not do well at the box office. It gets nominated, but does not win any Academy Awards. And it basically, but the critics like it. They really like it. Then the film.
It's also, and I would like to point out, it's also the #1 film on IMDb by the user rating. And so that's not just a bunch of egghead critics.
It is very important to say that. I was going to say that. That's where I was going. IMDb, it's the #1 film above the Godfather movies. So we're talking about a movie that absolutely, quality-wise, is fantastic. And I think it's a masterpiece. A lot of people, they think it's a masterpiece. People think it's a masterpiece. It's a fantastic movie. Okay. But that was the autopsy on this movie, that basically it became discovered through video and through cable television. People started to see it more. Now we're moving forward, like 95. So around 2000 was around the time when this film started to really just get adopted. It just becomes adopted by a lot of people that visit it for the very first time on cable or video, and then keep on reviewing it because it's really, really good. So how does it work for our purposes? Well, for our purposes, what we're trying to say then is, let's explain what happened. Why didn't it do extremely well when it opened? And this, to me, is one of the greatest reasons why Shawshank is to be examined. See, basically, when I look at what I wrote down for Shawshank, this is what IMDb uses as their synopsis. 2 imprisoned men bond over a number of years, finding solace and eventual redemption through acts of common decency. Okay. If we were to talk about other films that I've written the IMDb synopsis for, I would be very critical about the way that those written. But in many ways, this one is actually written very accurately about what the movie is about, what the movie is, the charms about this movie. If you're going to like it, you're going to like it because of this reason. So it's a very accurate synopsis. But here's the problem. At the outset, when you hear that said out loud, and you're like in a room pitching your script, you're sitting there going, oh my God, what are you talking about? Because, and here's the thing, I think we were talking about execution-based movies. And Shawshank is an execution-based movie, meaning that if you pitched what I just pitched to you, then you would discover, oh my God, what are you talking about? Again, imagining that it's an original script, that nobody knows what it is, that it doesn't have the Stephen King moniker, that you're pitching this, you're just sitting there going, okay, and you're saying it's set in a prison, right? Yeah, it's set in a prison. And you're looking redemption and all. Okay. Now, that's the executive, but I believe that when you say it, like all of what I just said, that's the way audiences also perhaps perceived the film or didn't get that that's what it was about, that they just saw a prison movie. Why? Because at the end of the day, what we've been talking about and why Shawshank Redemption is perfect is that here's the setup. Andy Dufresne is on trial for murdering his wife and her lover. He claims to be innocent. At the end of the first act, we don't know necessarily if he is or he's not, okay? Morgan's character, Red, is introduced. He's the latest. We see him doing a parole application that's rejected. And then during his narration, he sits there and he says, when Andy said, smuggle Rita Hayworth into the prison, I said, no problem. I told him no problem. So that then basically is the lead up to this is the first act where we basically don't know anything except that we're going to get to this, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you the bad version. So in other words, okay, we saw all the thing about Timothy Robbins, and now here's the bad version. So he's in prison, so he's got some lawyers on the outside. So now he's going to work with those lawyers to find out who the real killer was. And we're going to see this all play out and everything like that. And we're going to see that defined in the first act plot point. Okay, no, that didn't happen.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. If you'd like to hear the full interview, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts. Or to go directly to the episode, just use the link in the show notes. Thanks for watching.